Hey, it's Chris Schmidt, the Average Joe Sports Show, episode 11. Nebraska, Northwestern, the Huskers hang on.
Mitch Sherman here. We're looking back at a memorable Saturday night at the Devaney Center.
Hi, it's Bill Doleman. We're going to try to figure out who's best in the Big Ten West.
Yeah, the Big Ten West was crazy this weekend, Bill. Iowa, did they deserve to lose?
Welcome to it. The Average Joe Sports Show is here. It's episode 11. Chris Schmidt, Bill Doleman, Mitch Sherman, and Elijah Herbel. Find the show on YouTube. If you want to see our beautiful faces, the AJ Sports Show is where you go with that. You can also find us on Twitter. Give us a follow, the AJ Sports Pod, Spotify, and Apple Play is where you can download the show. Guys, a weekend of greats for volleyball. We'll get there. Nebraska, Wisconsin delivered. Husker football versus Northwestern. A hang on and hold on tight. And Nebraska did just that. Made it, well, a little interesting and going to be much more interesting injury-wise, Mitch, moving forward.
Yeah, I left campus on Saturday night around 11:30 from the Devaney Center thinking, man, today was a pretty great day for Nebraska athletics. Didn't look pretty in the football stadium, but you get above 500, and then, of course, 1 versus 2 was epic. And then return on Monday, I did, and hear from Matt Rule right at the get-go of his weekly news conference that not 1, not 2, but 3 starting offensive linemen are down and out. May get Nuri Nuili back in November, but Turner Corcoran and Ethan Piper are out for the season. You know, we knew these guys got dinged. Not so much Corcoran, although I'd heard that he was limping some with a foot after the game. Oh, and by the way, Billy Kemp, he's out too for a while with an MCL sprain. So these are 4 upperclassmen who are in the starting lineup. Your offensive line is the one place on that side of the ball where Nebraska has been consistent with its starting lineup. All 5 had started all 7 games. And here we go into the 8th game of the year against Purdue, and the Huskers are going to have 3 young offensive linemen starting for the first time this season. So, you know, you wanted youth. I think some fans did, despite the fact that Nebraska's leading the Big Ten in rushing and rushing yards per carry. You're getting youth. You're getting Teddy Prohaska. You're getting Justin Evans-Jenkins. You're getting Henry Lutovsky as starters this week with the Boilers coming to town.
Bill, the youth has been called for. It's one thing to call for it. It's another to have it kind of forced upon you. And these guys have been in the program a while. Justin Evans-Jenkins did really well at guard and at center.
He was good.
Yeah, he's solid, really good footwork. Henry Lutovsky's a guy that is talented, and he's come in and spelled Nuri or flat out replaced Nuri from time to time, so he's a good run blocker. And Teddy Prohaska, is a guy that has all sorts of talent, but is right now trying to kind of fight that injury demon.
When Matt Rule stepped to the podium at his press conference Monday at noon, it was reminiscent of the one about, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago now when he stepped to the podium and announced that Gabe Ervin and Ramir Johnson had been lost for the season. And you're thinking, oh, my gosh, in the wake of having lost Garcia Castaneda and Betts for various reasons at the wide receiver position earlier, and now you lose your top 2 running backs. Wow, what more can this team endure in terms of top unit offensive players? How about a few weeks later, let's just knock out a couple of offensive linemen, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, your starting quarterback has also been out with an ankle injury for the better part of this season. It is really remarkable, and they just continue to press on, as he said, and we're getting dangerously close to if we die, we die. But
wow,
now you're dead.
Nevertheless, there has to have been instilled in them through spring ball, through summer conditioning, winter conditioning, all of those things where you have to be ready when your number is called. And I think that's been a mantra since Matt Rule stepped on campus, that if you play, if you work hard, you will play. I think Heinrich Harburg even said that in one of his post-game press conferences that, they promised that if I work hard, I'm going to get a chance to play, and they've been true to their word. Well, we're about to find out if those young offensive linemen have been, making the most of biding their time and waiting for this opportunity, because it is now here at a very critical time in the season. This isn't getting ready for Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech. This is getting into the heart of your Big Ten season with a bowl game and, dare I say, an outside shot at winning the Big Ten West still on the line for this football team. It is remarkable what they have had to endure, and they have survived. Offensively, thankfully, they have a defense that has remained fairly healthy and gotten the job done.
Well, and Bill, you called it an outside chance at the Big Ten championship game, and while I still think that is true, you look back at the last couple games for Nebraska, they've been doing it pretty much without an offense anyway, and that's me being harsh on this offense, I know, but you're losing a lot of talent on that offensive line, and your rushing attack has been your strength, but let's not act like the Husker offense has been lighting the world on fire and leading the way. You still have your defense leading the way for this Husker football team, and if they're still playing up to the standard that we have seen from them, really dating back to the Michigan game and even a little further, the Michigan game just kind of an outlier, you still have that unit that leads the way, that right now is your best chance at winning football games, and they're relatively unchanged.
What does Nebraska do well on offense, right? We've been trying to figure that out or see it consecutively. And again, it's pinata time, apparently, on the Average Joe Sports Show. But in all seriousness, they have run the football well enough to get some points on the board if they've held on to the football and the quarterback run game. Yeah. And right now, Is that something you can have stay the same or improve upon here as you get out of October and into November? That's the question with these new faces on the O-line.
You saw Heinrich take some shots on Saturday against Northwestern. A couple times going down the field, getting into the secondary, and he puts his body out there. He's a big target, and he's getting some DBs and some linebackers are teeing off on him. And that's not going to let up. Purdue and Michigan State, and the teams ahead, you get beyond that, Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa obviously have good defenses, the last two. But even these next two, they're going to be physical. This is still Big Ten football. Even though Purdue statistically doesn't look like a great defense, they're going to take the opportunity to hit Heinrich when they get it. And teams are getting it, and they're probably going to get it even more now that there could be some holes in that offensive line. So, I wonder – is there somebody in Carolina who's got a little doll of Matt Rule, and every time he sticks a pin in it, somebody else on the offensive side goes
one whole unit?
Schmidt, you asked what this offense does well. As of right now, it's hobbled to the medical tent. I hope that's not in poor taste, but it's kind of true. Whenever you look at the starting lineup against Minnesota as compared to now, there's almost nobody still around.
Yeah, what they do well is they do find ways to get rushing yardage, and they move the chains all right on the ground, and averaging 195 yards a game rushing through this. It's 7 games in now, so it's not an anomaly. It's not like you've done this for 2 games. 7 games in, 195 yards on the ground. That's pretty solid, but so much of that is the QB run, and I don't think that discounts the number, but if you're doing it without QB run, that's a different look. It's a different complexion to the offense than when Harburg is he wasn't the leading rusher on Saturday. It was Emmett Johnson, but he was close, right there.
By a yard.
Right, by 1 yard. So really, it's a lot of QB, maybe close to 40% QB, so that's that's concerning, and they do that well. They run the ball with their quarterback pretty well.
I'm interested to see what can happen from a Rule to Satterfield to Raiola standpoint. They always have the player's best interest in mind. What does X, Y, and Z do well? Okay, and let's put a game plan around that. There's been some belly aching about, all right, the game plan. Rule clarified that after the Northwestern game. Look, I'm paraphrasing, but they're not going to get better throwing the football unless they throw the football during a game, and that needs to step forward. But the one thing that this staff
they're not going to play scared.
That's, right, yeah. and that's big. I need to see that development that you've seen on the defensive side of the football, where young guys are getting in, Bill, and can the offense have the same kind of shot in the arm, because they are forced now with these young guys to really go to them. And I think the style of practice has helped develop some of these young guys. Can they go do it for real, though, on a Saturday?
You left out when you mentioned Rule, Satterfield, Raiola, and Osborne.
Okay, my fault.
The brain trust.
Called the play.
I think
He called the play, the belly G option pass.
apparently one thing they
T.O.'s
do.
got binoculars. He saw the sign. He knows the sign. He called for an audible.
He's working for Jim Harbaugh? Wait, no. Sorry, I was confused there for a second.
They listen well. Apparently, they listen to Ron Brown and Tom Osborne when they're at practice and saying we got to work some of these plays in. And he mentioned in his presser at the beginning of the week, the multiple platoon practice system, which we've talked about many times over the years about how effective that has been for Nebraska. Players don't sit around and just watch practice. Everybody was involved way back in the day. I can remember when there were 4 stations on the turf at Memorial Stadium when Tom had his teams rolling. So, yeah, if you have multiple stations that are getting multiple dozens of reps in practice, players are going to be able to handle the assignment that's put upon them like these younger players are going to get. I can remember Huskers coming back from the NFL saying, I get like 7 to 10 reps in practice a day. And they'd come back and say, we used to get 70 to 100 reps in practice here in college. And so if you're doing that with those younger players, like James Williams,
Yes.
he must have been getting a lot of reps in practice on the scout team. And look what happens when his numbers called on Saturday. He became one of the stars of the game against Northwestern.
Can you believe that? And that's what the offense needs to take a page from. They need to say, let's look at the defense and how the defense has not needed as much to go with the next man up mentality. But that's the unit that's prepared for it. That's the unit that's going 20 and 25 players deep. I mean, James Williams is an incredible example. And what a story. I mean, It's the fourth quarter and it's a 1-score game. And here's a guy that you put in there to come in and rush the passer. If one thing goes wrong, he blows his assignment, the QB gets a little extra time to throw, DB gets burned. That could be a tie game.
Overtime. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could be a 2-point conversion. It's a tie game, but they trusted him. They saw something in him in practice with the scout team and said, hey, we can get this guy to actually do something that helps. And they bring him in, one package of plays, said, go get the quarterback. And he did it once with a sack, and then once or twice in addition to that, he was in on a pressure that really shut down Northwestern's bid to try to come back and tie that thing after it became a 1-score game at 17-9. So that's an insane story right there. That he played scout team last week and then is sacking the quarterback to help secure a Big Ten win on Saturday. You just don't see that. And now the offense is in the territory where they're going to have to pull something out similar to that to make this a just functional group going forward.
But think about how they're practicing, okay? If it is patty cake out there, soft football, Sunday through Friday, as we've been kind of led to believe that it's been in recent years, and perhaps some teams, don't really go hard, and maybe you have a day or two a week where there is some contact, and if guys are not getting reps in practice, that doesn't happen for James Williams. If his job and the scout team job is to apply a little pressure, but don't hit the guy in the green jersey or don't, take anybody out that might get hurt in practice. If you're not going hard Sunday through Friday, you can't just turn that on Saturday. So he was prepared to play. And all of those other young players that we saw, the tone was set defensively against Minnesota. No, they didn't win that game. And yes, they had breakdowns in the final 5 minutes of that game. But 25 guys played in that opener on the defensive side of the football. They were convinced that those guys could play. They had been prepared to play. And we see that week after week after week. If somebody does get hurt defensively, somebody's already gotten the reps and the confidence built up that they can go get the job done. Now, defensively, the complexities aren't there necessarily that you have on offense. You've got to execute an offensive game plan. With that defense, it is ball snapped, go get the ball, and hit him hard, essentially.
Yeah, it's a great point about James Williams. If he didn't have the opportunity in practice to get home and actually hit somebody, then they don't know what kind of a pass rusher he is, because part of pass rushing is being able to finish.
Yep.
And if he's got to run up to the quarterback or the running back and just thud that guy up, then how do you really know what you have? And it's then it becomes a lot more difficult to put that guy into a situation on a Saturday. It was interesting to hear Matt Rule today tell a story about being visited by an NFL scout this year. And the scout told him, and Rule was very clear that he wasn't saying this. This was not his analysis. He doesn't want this going viral and have half of the SEC and the rest of the Big Ten mad at him. But the scout said that the practices he saw at Nebraska were the second hardest of any team in the country. And the hardest practicing team in the country was, guess who? Georgia. Sure. So, and Rule did say, we're gonna catch them. That was as close as he got to any kind of a bold statement there. But just that little, and a different scout might have a different analysis. It doesn't matter what number they are. If they're 2, 4, 8, they're one of the hardest practicing teams in the country, and that's a pretty dramatic change around here, I would say.
And when you talk about that development from those practices, practicing hard, I think James Williams is such a fantastic story. I mean, you heard his name on Saturday. You're going to hear his name a hell of a lot more. He has got 4 years for 3 years of eligibility. He's probably going to redshirt this year, despite the fact of how well he played on Saturday. They're probably going to want to get 3 more years out of him. And
yeah,
he almost fits that mold perfectly of what Matt Rule looks for in recruits. Whenever you hear the Matt Rule, man, he finds diamonds in the rough and he develops them up. I mean, James Williams has athletic traits. He was a late athletic bloomer in high school. Didn't even start on varsity until his senior year. He kind of moved around everywhere. Was born in Norman, Oklahoma. His dad played at Oklahoma. His grandpa played at Oklahoma. So he has those athletic bloodlines that we've seen Matt Rule likes. Goes off to junior college. And what did Terrence Knight and Matt Rule like about him? Highly projectable athletic traits. He said that, according to what Matt Rule told him during that recruitment process, he had longer arms than any edge rusher in the draft last year. And he's playing at Iowa Central, lightly recruited. Nobody knows who he is. And on top of that, size 18 feet. So he's got like these highly projectable athletic traits that nobody knows about because he's playing at a high-flying offense at Iowa Central. Didn't even start until the last couple of games of his freshman year at Iowa Central. And he's planning on playing there one more year. He goes through spring practice, gets a DM from Rob Dvoracek on Twitter, ends up at a Husker camp this summer for postgrads. And Terrence Knighton falls in love with him because he's one of 2 defensive linemen that shows up, and they see these athletic traits and say, we can make something out of this guy. Bring him in. It took him a couple weeks to get his feet under him at Nebraska and understand what
they're
he expects.
size 18s.
You can see him from space. I mean,
Took a while to lace him up.
But he, like, you talk about, Matt Rule talks about the Hassan Reddick story at Temple, where nobody knew who this guy was. We saw the athletic traits. If there's a guy right now at Nebraska that fits the bill of what Hassan Reddick was at Temple, it's James Williams right now, and you're going to see 3 more years of him.
Yeah, let's say he's going to be Hassan Reddick at this point. The guy that he reminds me of, and the story that he reminds me of. I mean, Hassan Reddick's a great example, and is starring in the NFL.
It's a lofty comparison.
Right.
Yeah.
James Lynch is another example.
Okay.
We know about James Husker Lynch. Given middle name is Husker, and he played for Matt Rule at Baylor from 17 to 19, turned into a 4th-round pick. He plays for the Vikings, was a unanimous All-American in 2019, unheralded, and Baylor just found this guy. He wanted to come to Nebraska. His name is Husker, but he wasn't given the opportunity to come to Nebraska out of high school in Round Rock, Texas, so he went to Baylor, unheralded, turns into a freshman All-American. We're talking about things that are way off in the distance potentially for somebody like James Williams, but this is a staff, and this is a head coach who has a knack for being able to sniff these players out and find them for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because he's looking more for like track measurables when it comes to the DBs and the wide receivers, and there's some traits that they look for. It might be long arms, big feet when it comes to defensive linemen and offensive linemen. But it's happened over and over and over. It's not a coincidence that this kind of a player has now emerged. And think about, what's he going to be like next year? I'm not saying you put the guy on the All Big Ten team next year, but he's legitimately somebody who can turn into a productive pass rusher for Nebraska in 2024. And 90% of us in the fan base had never heard of him before Saturday.
Who's 90? How many times do we hear that in the press box?
The number of people looking down on the rosters.
Right? And Oh, okay. Wow, he just won on 3rd and 8. Really flushed the pocket. Oh, wow, he just won on 3rd down and 7. Flushed the. I mean, he was nice. I like what Williams has been doing, and credit to Nebraska for pulling the trigger on getting him ready and letting him flow. But the 3rd down package in general is a lot of fun, where you've got Bayer in there, Prince Will, and you've got Ty Robinson, and then Nash is a guy that had a great ball game and collapsed the interior of the pocket. And I just marvel at how far he's come, strength and conditioning, and just from an agility standpoint. I know that's been talked about a little bit, but you're really seeing it show up on situational moments where Nebraska has not been great in the past. They're getting to have a real feel and be one of the best there is. Now, 3rd and long, it still feels like a mid-'80s Fiesta Bowl, because it's 3rd and 15 and 17 yards are picked up. The 3rd and long numbers need to go the different direction, and I think Coach Rule would say that. But overall, you've got the versatility to put together 11 dudes that are going to help you be a problem on 3rd down on those money downs. One of the things Rule's talked about a lot in his time here has been situational football.
I mean, they might actually be starting the scout team offense here, the way the season's going. Like, when we get to November, the guys who are running the scout team offense will be the starters. You may have Jack Wosh out there at quarterback.
The transfer from Ole Miss.
The point is that the defense is going to give this team a chance. Mm-hmm. And we've started to see it a little bit from the special teams, too. Brian Buschini
great kick,
had a great punt, 55 yards into the wind, that pinned Northwestern. And then Northwestern had to punt out of its end zone, which is what set up the 44-yard pass from Harburg to Malachi for the touchdown in the 4th quarter that really changed the game, that won the game for Nebraska. So you're starting to see complementary football. You're starting to see the great defense mix with some plays on special teams that we didn't see early in the season. So, like we'll say later in the show, I think, about Iowa, if you can be very good on two out of the 3 phases, you give yourself a chance. You deserve. You're in games.
You do have a shot to be one of the last teams standing in the Big Ten West. Average Joe Sports Show, episode 11. That's Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Find us on YouTube. The AJ Sports Show is where you can type in and watch this episode, or find us on Twitter. Give us a follow, the AJ Sports Pod, Spotify. And you can also go to the Apple Pods, download, and tell a buddy about the Average Joe Sports Show. We go from football to Husker Volleyball, and just a couple of minutes to, well, I'm looking for my big old red cowboy hat, and I want to tip it to John Cook and his team. What a fun night, Mitch. You were there. Bill, you and I tipped a beer and watched. Elijah, I know you had your eyes hunker down on it as well. Mitch, you were in the mix for it, and what a comeback with how it started. The middle part was really dicey, and then the finish by the Big Red.
I was in the mix. I was above the mix. I wasn't down in the mix on the court.
John Cook, he wasn't in the mosh pit.
John Cook, a little factoid here. He wanted the students to rush the floor. I mean, what kind of a coach? Isn't that great? Like,
all you care of the fun.
Do it. All you need to know is that the 67-year-old head coach, it was 1,200 students. They were waiting outside, for the early in the football game, outside the Devaney Center. They get in with 90 minutes before. That place was over 9,000 on Saturday night. It was as much energy as I've seen in the Devaney since state basketball when I was junior in high school. There were. I'm exaggerating a bit. There were some amazing basketball games like late 90s. Tournament teams. It was. The Devaney Center is a lot different now as a volleyball-only arena. But, it doesn't look like the same arena. But the energy and the juices that got going, it kind of reminded me of some of the really old days in that building. And the noise was loud. But Cook wanted the kids to rush the court, and he got overruled by the security that said, no, we're not doing that. And we tear down the net. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was
going
to say is can you take that? We talked about tearing down the goalposts in the show a couple weeks ago. Can you take that net and take it down to O Street? All the students going down.
The only thing kind of a bummer was, the volleyball team, after they do that little where Nebraska won, they always sprint right off the floor. It would have been nice to see them, hang out and just enjoy that moment a little bit longer. with the fans who, stayed around. Not just the students weren't the only ones celebrating with John Cook. People didn't want to leave the building based on what I saw. But it would have been nice if the players had, instead of sprinting into the locker room, had just hung out and enjoyed that moment. Yeah, there's a lot of season left to be played, and as John said after the match, just another one night in the Big Ten. Well, it wasn't. It was. The only thing that could top that would be what? I don't know, put 92,000 people at Memorial Stadium, right?
Yeah.
And pulling off a win.
He did that.
One thing an observation that I made, and I've thought this about this team, and it's something that can apply to other sports. And there were a ton of other athletes there, by the way, on Saturday night. You saw the tweets from other head coaches who were in the building. Matt Rule was at home on his couch, but
couldn't afford tickets.
I think Rhonda Revelle was there, and I saw Chief Borders at the game. Of course, you saw Josiah Alec, the basketball player whose sister Becca Alec is a starting middle blocker for Cook's team. You saw Carter Nelson and Danny Kalin, the football recruits who were there holding up the signs.
Wasn't wearing a Notre Dame shirt.
Badgers don't we? We just talk about Carter Nelson every pod. Just a little different context today. He's holding up a sign that said the Badgers can't win at the Bob. Him and Danny had those signs together, so that was fun to see. But okay, so one observation that I've got, and I made this observation about Harper Murray, who is probably going to be the Big Ten Freshman of the Year, if it's not Bergen Riley, the setter. She is an alpha. She is a dog, as the coaches and players put it today when you're over at Memorial Stadium and they're talking about a big-time player, somebody who wants the ball in their hands in the fourth quarter with 3 minutes to go. This is the volleyball version of that. Mm-hmm. She was hitting negative for the match until the fifth set, and she actually started to take over at the end of the fourth set, had a couple of kills and then an ace to end that fourth set at 26-24, 7 kills in the fifth set for Harper Murray, the true freshman, who's, of course, coming into Nebraska as the National Player of the Year, and in high school, the Gatorade Player of the Year. So it's not like this is an unknown recruit. We're not talking about James Williams here, the volleyball version. She's the opposite of that. Yeah. But just a competitor to every level that you can be. And the thing about that roster is she's not the only one. Merritt Beeson, the transfer from Florida, she's the same way. Mm-hmm. Riley is a silent assassin. You don't see it with the thundering kills, but her precision as a setter and knowing when to, dump that ball when they need a point. Same thing with Lainey Choboy, the defensive specialist who is all over the court, is like sprinting around the floor instead of going to the team huddle to celebrate. I mean, just a lightning bolt of energy and excitement. They have an embarrassment of riches. I'm not even talking about Becca Alec, who brings great energy, Lindsey Krause, who didn't play in this match because she was on the bench in a boot. It's like at every position, every player is this like type A athletic mentality that every other sport on campus, softball has one now with Jordy Ball, but every other sport on campus would just kill to have one of them. And John Cook's team has like 10.
And they're still getting better. Those young athletes are still getting better. You saw the development, I think, within the match on Saturday. As they settled into that moment, and obviously they lived off the energy of that crowd in the first set, and then adversity strikes in the second and the third, and you saw them rise to that challenge in the fourth and the fifth. That's not really a challenge that they've had to face all year long, and you saw them rise to that and get better as the night went on. That's what really impressed me. Is I wasn't even there. I was watching the game on TV, but you could see how that moment in the fourth set where they're down, I think, 4 points late, it galvanized them. They came together in that moment, and you saw the development as that match went on. That's what really impressed me is they could have rolled over and said, you know what, we got this Wisconsin team one more time. They got us tonight in front of the home crowd, but they didn't do that. They didn't roll over. They continued fighting, battling, scratching. I mean, you saw, Harper Murray didn't have a great night all night, and then you saw at the end of the fourth and the fifth, she was playing her best volleyball. You saw the development from her, and you could name just about anyone who was on the court on Saturday night, seeing them get better as the night went on.
I don't know about you guys, but how does Kelly Sheffield sit with you, the Wisconsin coach? Does he seem like a likable guy? When you're watching him on TV, what kind of a vibe does he put off?
Baron von Raschke.
I'll tell you what kind of vibe he put off in the
mother of all
arena.
Russian wrestling heels. German, forgive me.
From Omaha, Jim Raschke from Omaha South.
Right, so he's not super. He plays the villain well Let's say that. And it was the third set, and Wisconsin had all the momentum, and they were up big, and he decided to argue a call. And what he was really doing was just giving his team a rest, and he was talking with his players for an extended period of time about whether he should challenge a call. And he got yellow carded, which in volleyball terms is just a warning, like sit down. And the crowd got into it, and the crowd got mad, and they started booing him, and they started cheering. And Nebraska lost that set, but the energy that was place was pretty dead for the second when Wisconsin had 12 blocks, which is incredible, and most of the third. And then Sheffield got up off the bench, and it's like he tempted the volleyball gods. Like, you don't mess with the magic of Nebraska's home arena. And that goes back to the Coliseum. And, Terry Pettit would tell you these things. Like, if you got a chance to get out of there with a win as an opposing team, you need to understand that that's a very rare situation, and you probably don't want to disturb anything that might be going your way. And perhaps it's because Wisconsin's had won 10 in a row against Nebraska, and he was comfortable in that moment and thought, I can do no wrong. Well, he did something wrong by stirring up that crowd. And I think that the energy that he generated from getting pissed off and in turn angering the Nebraska fans, that's where Nebraska got a lift to go ahead and win that fourth set by 2 points, needed every edge it could have, and then, of course, go into the fifth and work more magic.
Greed not always good.
Yeah, I've always said, when you go around the country and do games, and, I've never been to Cameron Indoor, but I've always said I would put the Nebraska Coliseum up with Fog Allen, Cameron Indoor, and any other indoor venue for the crowd, for the electricity, for the atmosphere, and for this intangible thing that can happen because of that atmosphere that the crowd can actually make a difference. People would laugh at me about that. I'm just telling you, playing in the Coliseum and having done matches there where you would feel like the building was breathing. I mean, you would feel it, and I think that was probably on display on Saturday. And as I'm watching that match develop, I think that Wisconsin is probably the better team because it is so big and so physical along the front line. Nebraska 44 errors, but I'm not convinced that Nebraska is not the best team because of all of the dynamics that are in play with that team right now and the way they can come together and overcome 44 errors and not be intimidated or demoralized when you can't beat that block. And I've seen volleyball for 35 years. When you can't beat a block, it is demoralizing. Or when somebody's digging up balls in the back and you just feel like nothing's going to hit the floor. But there's something going on with that team, and it's chemistry, it's camaraderie, everything, that they got something special going on, and I think that maybe makes them best where Wisconsin might be better. And they're going to play again at least one more time, and they will probably meet again at the very end, and that'll be a hell of a match, and Krause will be back for that.
Well, guys, it is official, by the way, in the AVCA coaches poll. Nebraska has moved up to number 1, but what's interesting, one voter still giving Wisconsin a number 1 overall vote in the poll.
Damn, Kelly Sheffield.
To your point, Mitch, that started this whole thing, but no, as we'll put a bow on volleyball here, great points on just what special talent you have down there, but it's paired with a mentality.
Yeah.
And you've got an embarrassment of riches of all of it. And they didn't back away or say, hey, we'll learn from this. They wanted to take care of business in that moment and found a way to come back.
And
it doesn't happen very often.
Allie Batenhorst deserves, a lot of credit, because there was a number 1 player in the country a couple of years ago, and she has been relegated to a prominent role player, but nevertheless to a role player on a great team where freshmen are getting playing time. And Lindsey Krause has, become maybe Nebraska's best outside hitter, although Harper Murray would certainly, you could probably say that. But for Batenhorst to come in and play the way that she did, she's not Lindsey Krause, but she played well enough for Nebraska. Beck Alec is the one who can match Wisconsin's physicality at the net, no doubt about it. But I was happy for Allie Batenhorst for her to do what she did.
Isn't it funny to say that Krause, isn't it? There's an argument there to be had about who the best outside hitter is on the team. I mean, Murray is, and I would agree with you. That's the case. Those two, there's a discussion to be had. Krause's more consistent right now. Murray's a future Olympian. You know, she's the one that you say, yeah, she's going to be wearing that uniform that she's a Jordan Larson in the making. Yet she may be like the third most effective outside hitter at times on this one college team.
And Bergen Riley, one more. I think she will go down as the best setter Nebraska's ever had. And I think she's already in the conversation.
Yeah.
Pretty bold.
She's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I mean, with this young core, and I think we'll probably wrap up volleyball with this. I mean, this core has a chance to have some of the best seasons Husker Volleyball's ever had. You go back to 2000 when they ran the table, went 34-0 that year, won the national title. I mean, that's the kind of rarefied air we're talking about with what this team has the opportunity in front of them to do. Still undefeated at this point in the season. You've beaten the number 2 best team in the country as it stands in Wisconsin, beaten the number 3 best team in the country as it currently stands in Stanford. You have a chance to do something really special this year, and then you look at the young core. They still have years ahead of them as Husker Volleyball players. Just the core that John Cook has assembled, it feels to me like the kind of core that you can end a career with.
It's Fab Five-ish. I mean, right? It's just to put a reference.
Final thought, and to piggyback on what you said, Elijah, about the way their season's headed. What that did on Saturday night is that there's really probably not a scenario that exists unless, disaster happens, like a football kind of situation with the injuries, where they're not a top seed in the tournament. The top seed or one of the top 4 is all they need to get to play at home in Lincoln through to the Final Four. And that's great news for Nebraska fans, because many times in recent years they've been in that kind of 5-6 range and had to go on the road for regionals. So Nebraska fans, they're going to get to continue this love affair with this team all the way up till the second weekend, or I think it's December 8th and 10th when they play that regional finals and regional semis at home sites.
The Average Joe Sports Show continues on, and find us on YouTube, The AJ Sports Show. It's where you can log in there, or the AJ Sports Pod for Twitter, and Spotify and Apple for the digital download. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. We've hit volleyball and Nebraska's MASH unit. Let's get to the Big Ten West, as it is as funky as ever with the Big Ten West, another West weekend that was pretty wild. And we'll start with Iowa, because I was talking to my buddy Iowa Russ, had a couple beers with him yesterday, and he just looks through my soul and says, it's not just yesterday, it's not just this season, it's 3 years of this bleep. You
can say it.
3 years of this bullshit.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah, we're not on the radio anymore, Schmitty. It's a podcast. You're allowed to.
He's like, I can't even watch it. And he grew up 15 minutes from Iowa City, and he goes out there, sadly, and I can just picture him doing this in his Iowa hoodie and his Iowa hat, and he just starts raking leaves.
Since you said it, I mean, their offense, it's dog shit.
Yes.
that's I don't want to get too crazy here, but 2 yards? 2 yards?
It's something lit on fire on someone's front porch.
In the 2 yards in the second half?
Fire out. Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody's talking after this game about Cooper DeJean and his amazing punt return that was called back because of the invalidation of the fair catch signal.
Lay that out, because you have an explanation. My brother sent me a screenshot through a connection of his, and, I mean, that's been the uproar. There's people laughing. Iowa got hosed. Ha, ha, ha.
Run for more than 2 yards.
I know. That didn't lose us the game. Well, it didn't help. Iowa's routinely found a way on defense or special teams to be the offense, and that was taken away from them.
Yeah,
in some people's eyes.
So my understanding, and this is reading the statement from the referee and the story that my Iowa colleague Scott Docterman wrote, is that it's not, and I think a lot of people believe that the officials called DeJean for signaling fair catch. And they said, it wasn't a fair catch signal. He's waving his hand below his waist or around his waist. That's not a fair catch. It's got to be above his head. And that isn't what the call was. They called him for invalidating the fair catch signal. So essentially, if the officials rule that you're doing something with your hands that could make the defense or the coverage team believe that you're calling for a fair catch, then that's a penalty. And that makes the return, that wipes off the return. Now, the strange thing is that they found that on the review. that wasn't called on the field. They reviewed the play because they wanted to see if he stepped out of bounds. He didn't step out of bounds. That was determined. But, while looking at that,
we can get him for this.
They saw that he moved his arm in a way that could be construed as like a fake fair catch signal. And, if the situation had played out differently, maybe Minnesota lets up in coverage and it gives him an unfair advantage. So that's why the penalty exists. But it's so unusual that it was called on the review. That's where I think I have some questions. And it's a reviewable play, but if you didn't see it on the field and you weren't reviewing that specific incident, wow, you're talking about some gray area.
But I still think that the officials, as much as people don't want to admit it, got it right. Because there's
technically,
probably,
yes.
there's, that gets down to, we were talking before, I think what they're calling with the invalid fair catch signal is similar to a quarterback giving himself up on a slide. If you are saying, get away from the ball, we're not going to field it, it's going to just let it die, and then you pick up the ball and start running with it, there is a deception there. There's, you can't clap your hands and deceive the offense into snapping the football. You can't be a quarterback who's running and then goes into a slide, but then doesn't slide and pops back up.
Like you're at Pitt in the bowl game.
Right. So there are certain things, there are certain deceptions in written in pencil and in gray in the rule book, but I think
that's why the rule exists,
right,
unquestionably.
And I suppose the officials looked at it, even though they were looking for the out of bounds, were they looking, in a manner of speaking, for an inadvertent whistle type thing? Oh, there was a whistle, so the play is dead. Oh, there was an invalid fair catch signal. They were giving up the play, so therefore the play should have been dead where it was.
Well, as Matt Rule said at the press conference today, it's not about whether you like the rule or not. It's the fact that it is a rule. He was talking about Jim Harbaugh, and he was trying to speak in a roundabout way. And he's essentially saying, we all have to follow the same rule book here. It doesn't matter whether you like the rule or not, whether the rule is a good rule or not. Simply put, it is in the rule book, and you have to follow the rules.
What I saw is this, and I watched it 100 times, and we watched it in the press box right after Rule's presser on Saturday night. And to me, it was Cooper saying, get the hell away, don't get... Because Iowa lost a game in Madison 3-4 years ago because one of the guys was blocking, the ball rolled and hit his calf, and Wisconsin recovered. That's happened to Iowa on special teams before. And I thought he was saying, get away, get away, get away to his guys. That's what he's going to tell you. And it doesn't matter. Minnesota's got to run down and down it anyway, right? I mean, they got to cover that kick, whether or not he's telling people to get away or he's screaming grenade. And maybe... by doing that on one hand, and then the way he fielded that and then went through bumper cars of 8 or 9 players and then broke free.
He's an incredible talent. There's no doubt about that. He should be playing. Why don't they put him on offense? I mean, really.
No, legitimately. I'm looking at the Iowa Hawkeyes subreddit, and it should be noted, none of their posts since the game are about that fair catch call. They're not frustrated about that. The number one post is, this isn't a football problem. This is a moral, ethical problem. The number 2 post, this is bigger than Brian Ferentz. It's also Kirk Ferentz's fault. And then you get down a little bit further. Cooper DeJean was a beast quarterback in high school. He has all the athletic traits a modern offensive-minded quarterback system would want. Put him under center, RPOs, bootlegs. If Brian doesn't want to do it, fire him. And if Kirk doesn't want to do it, fire him too. But that's one of the top posts in the Iowa subreddit this week. They want Cooper DeJean playing quarterback.
So I think the overarching question here, and I've seen this discussed a lot nationally, is did Iowa deserve this? So let's just say, for the sake of this discussion, that the Hawkeyes got jobbed. Let's say it was that shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have reviewed a play that they weren't initially looking at the tape for, or even if you want to say it was the wrong call. Let's say Iowa got hosed at home. Do they deserve to lose because they don't even try to do anything on offense? Because they are so bad offensively that they can't even muster 5 yards of total offense in the second half against Minnesota? I'm curious. Do you think that they should, like, if Iowa is sitting here at 7-1 this week, and we're continuing to talk about how there are these unusual but possible circumstances that could put them into the college football playoff, there's a lot of people out there who are just happy they lost. Yeah, you're going to beat Michigan, okay. But, until you play the game. There's a lot of people out there who are happy they lost just so they don't have to listen to talk about Iowa being 7-1, 8-1, 9-1 as we get into November.
Get them out of the discussion early.
Look, if Iowa got 5 yards of total offense in a second half of a Big Ten football game because they lost their starting quarterback, 4 of their top receivers, their top 2 running backs, and now 3 of their starting offensive linemen, I'd have a little bit more sympathy for their plight. Okay, yeah, they did lose a starting quarterback. I get that. But they have not nearly endured the changes in personnel that Nebraska is going through right now.
It's also not a first-year system. It's a 20th-year system.
Right, exactly.
Well,
how old is Brian Ferentz? 40-year system because he's been with Dad that long. But look, they have put themselves in this position with whatever ineptitude they have accepted over the years offensively, and I believe it is in the drive for 325. They need to average, I think I read, 36 points per game the rest of the season or in order to get to 325. And I don't think that they've had, their last 3 or 4 games have not had an over-under ahead of more than 35 points.
Brian's not getting that number.
No.
He's not getting fired either.
No, he's not.
He's not getting fired.
And that's not what the contract clause says. It just says that he doesn't get rolled over for another year, doesn't get an extension, doesn't get a raise. And I think that's all out the window. It just depends. I mean, they got a new AD. Kirk's not going to do it. If you want to fire Brian, you got to fire me. That's what Kirk's going to say.
Kirk, he said it was before Big Ten Media Days last year. They asked Kirk, what's the most overrated stat in football? And he said offensive yardage. And
points.
I think he truly believed it. What have Husker fans learned over the past 7 years playing in the Big Ten West? Sometimes in the Big Ten West, I shouldn't say sometimes, most of the times in the Big Ten West, if you want to win football games, it's about risk aversion. In Iowa's offense, they take that to the umpteenth level in terms of risk aversion. But that's what it is. And you've seen it with Nebraska this year. How are they going to lose football games? It's turnovers and putting yourself in risky situations. Iowa never does it. It's why they win football
forward
games.
pass.
It's why they win football games. They don't put
points are overrated
offensively.
No, Iowa didn't deserve that. They are pretty unique in how they find a way to win and have found a way to win 8, 9, 10 ball games. And I appreciate their defense, their special teams. There's a lot of stubbornness with offense, specifically some personnel choices. I mean, biscuits and gravy, whoever started at quarterback, and I call him biscuits and gravy, is not the answer. You've got a kid who started for you in the past as your third team quarterback you could go to. You've got supposedly a better line this year with a really good running game. And they're going to point, well, you know what, we had an 82-yard run against Wisconsin. That's all the offense you need. Iowa probably goes into every game expecting to give up a maximum of 3 points with their defense.
Yeah, before we talk about Wisconsin, and we should get to them, I will say to answer my own question, I don't think they deserve to lose.
No, I don't
think
either.
It's fine. I think it's fine. I mean, it's not fine. I don't like watching it. But, but if you're great at defense and you're great at special teams, and now there's people that saying that Torrey Taylor is the greatest punter in the history of punting. I mean, he's whatever. He's very, very good. That's okay. You should be allowed. You deserve to win football games if you're that good at 2 of the 3 phases in the game. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of teams out there that are flawed on defense or on special teams, but can throw the ball up and down the field. And we don't say they deserve to lose because they can't kick the ball or they don't play defense. It'll get you in the end. Iowa's not going to win the Big Ten. They weren't going to win the Big Ten even if they had beaten Minnesota on Saturday. It'll get them in the end, and they're limiting their potential as a program by being so stubborn that they won't do what's best for themselves offensively. They won't take those risks that you mentioned, Elijah. But I'm not in the camp that says good. I'm glad they lost because they're so ugly to watch on offense.
You know what game? As I'm sitting here listening to this, the game I would love to see: Colorado against Iowa.
Oh my gosh.
Wouldn't that be a fascinating case study?
You kind of did see it on September 9th in Boulder.
You would have a great.
Nebraska's not all that much different.
Right, but you'd have a. This would be from more of an objective standpoint, I guess.
For research purposes only.
Yeah, exactly. But the case study of coaches, how would Deion be disrespected by Iowa and Kirk Ferentz, and
you have a great game on offense.
Great offense.
Iowa's offense is an affront to Deion Sanders in Colorado.
It makes him
but what about Colorado's defense?
It isn't. It's also personal.
Well, that game is a Lamborghini against like a 1984 Chevy truck with 250,000 miles that keeps on trucking. That's what that is. And
it's an 84 Ford Bronco.
Yeah, a great defense and a really good offense, and a defense that can't stop anybody, and an offense that can't go anywhere.
And that'd be all right.
Put the ball at the 50, and you're not going to get past the 45.
Keep going 5 yards each way. Guys, we'll wrap with Wisconsin. What a guts win by the Badgers. That's on Nebraska's schedule looming. They were able to come back from 18 down and win at Illinois. And now they head to Ohio State, and that will give the Badgers likely a second loss. And this West race continues here, but pretty shocked with how Wisconsin came back. They had to have that, Mitch and Bill and Elijah, because they were on the ropes, and that's just gutting for Illinois and Burt.
Yeah, Braden Locke, 21 of 41, 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. That's a backup quarterback who's getting it done.
He's getting better.
That's not. That's not the situation we've seen, at least in the passing game, with backup quarterbacks, or now a starting quarterback in Heinrich Harburg, but a backup early in the year, and of course what we're seeing at Iowa. So maybe this is the air raid coming into focus for Phil Longo and Luke Fickell and the Badgers.
Well,
but
on the other hand, Mitch, there was a late play, and people were watching the Iowa punt return at this point. They were happening almost at the exact same time. There was a late play that showed, I think, some development for Phil Longo in the Big Ten. 3rd and 10 from the Illinois 46, a minute 28 left in the ball game. Wisconsin is driving down, needing to score some points to win this football game. 3rd and 10, what do? They run Braylon Allen up the middle. He picks up 11, gets in Wisconsin first down. And I remember watching that live while we're doing our reaction show here and going, what has gotten into Phil Longo? Running the ball on 3rd and 10?
loves running the ball at the pin and pull on 3rd and 8 or long. They have made money on it, but
not Phil Longo.
Not Longo.
18 points in the fourth quarter. So Wisconsin was on the ropes, and they were about to go down at Illinois in what would have been a kind of a soul-crushing loss.
Third straight loss potentially with Ohio State losing.
Yeah, for sure. So they're alive. And that's basically what you need to be. That's the best case scenario in the Big Ten West. Well, we're alive, and Nebraska's in that camp too.
That was a must-win, no doubt about it. And for whatever transpires in the Big Ten, that game will probably be the one that determines a lot. Mm-hmm. That they came back and beat Illinois. That gives them momentum going in to the remainder part of their season. They have Nebraska at home. That offense will probably be a little bit better by the time it will have evolved, and they're not going to have the spare parts playing like Nebraska does. So I think that fourth quarter for Wisconsin over Illinois may be the deciding factor as to who goes to Indianapolis.
That'll wrap us for the Average Joe Sports Show, episode 11. Be back later in the week to look at Nebraska-Purdue. Find us on YouTube.
Can I make one last point here before we say goodbye, Schmitty?
Sports Show real quick, and then the AJ Sports Pod for the Average Joe Sports Show on Twitter.
I'm diving into the stats here. One of the more interesting things from this weekend, Illinois, 223 yards on the ground against Wisconsin, which doesn't remind you of what Wisconsin football is. 223 yards on the ground. As for Nebraska, they held them to 21 yards on the ground. It's just two programs. It feels like moving in different directions, with Wisconsin trying to modernize and bring themselves into modern college football, and Nebraska almost going back to what's done well in Nebraska for years and years. And just a really interesting case study, these two hires, because I think that Matt Rule at Nebraska will always kind of be tied hand in hand to Luke Fickell at Wisconsin because of the timetable in which they were hired and the two different directions they're trying to move their football programs. It's going to be really interesting to study, not only for the rest of the year, but over the next 3 to 4 years, how each of these programs responds and changes.
Well, you'll get a chance at playing one another in Madtown here in November. Get us a subscription. Mitch Sherman and Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. We'll talk to you next time.